Sarah Martinez sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria, her worn-out sneakers barely touching the cold linoleum floor as she hunched over her brown bag lunch. The buzz of teenage conversations filled the air around her, but none of those voices belonged to friends. At 17, Sarah had grown accustomed to being invisible, though today felt different. Today, the whispers seemed louder, the stares more obvious. "Look at her clothes," giggled Jessica, the head cheerleader, from 3 tables away. "Did she get those from a garage sale?" The comment sparked a round of snickers from her circle of friends, each one dressed in designer jeans and perfectly styled hair. Sarah glanced down at her faded jeans and hand-me-down sweater from her older cousin. The fabric was soft from countless washes, but she knew it looked nothing like the trendy outfits her classmates wore. Sarah's family had moved to Riverside High just 6 months ago when her father lost his job at the factory. Her mother worked double shifts at the local diner to make ends meet, and there was no money for new clothes or the latest gadgets that seemed to define popularity in this school. Back at her old school in the smaller town, Sarah had been well liked. She was smart, helpful, and had a small but loyal group of friends. Here, everything was different. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Sarah carefully folded her brown bag and tucked it into her backpack, a habit she'd developed to reuse it throughout the week. As she stood to leave, she noticed Marcus Thompson approaching her table. Marcus was one of the most popular boys in school, tall, athletic, with an easy smile that made teachers favor him and girls swoon. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, wondering if he was actually going to talk to her. "Hey, Sarah," Marcus said, his voice carrying just loud enough for nearby students to hear. "I was wondering if you'd like to go to the winter formal with me?" Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. She looked around, noticing that several students had stopped their conversations to watch this unexpected interaction. The winter formal was the biggest event of the school year, and Sarah had never imagined she'd have a chance to attend, let alone with someone like Marcus. "Really?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A small smile began to form on her lips as she imagined what it would be like to dress up, to dance, to feel like she belonged for just one night. Marcus nodded, his grin widening. "Yeah, absolutely. What do you say?" Yes," Sarah replied, feeling a rush of excitement she hadn't experienced since moving to Riverside. "Yes, I'd love to go with you." "Great," Marcus said. "I'll pick you up at 7 on Saturday night." As Marcus walked away, Sarah felt like she was floating. Students around her were whispering again, but this time she didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe she could find her place in this school after all. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation. Sarah's mother, Maria, was initially hesitant about the expense of a formal dress, but seeing her daughter's excitement, she agreed to take an extra shift to help pay for a simple but elegant dress from the discount store downtown. They spent Thursday evening hemming the navy blue dress and picking out inexpensive accessories that would make Sarah feel special. "Mija," her mother said as she pinned the hem, "you look beautiful. This boy is lucky to take you to the dance." Sarah beamed, feeling more confident than she had in months. She practiced walking in the low heels her mother had borrowed from a friend, and even experimented with a simple makeup look she'd learned from watching online tutorials on the library computer. Saturday evening arrived, and Sarah was ready by 6:30, her hair carefully styled and her dress fitting perfectly. She sat by the window, watching for Marcus's car. 7 o'clock came and went. Then, 7:15. By 7:30, Sarah's mother was pacing the small living room, muttering in Spanish about disrespectful boys. At 8 o'clock, Sarah's phone finally buzzed with a text message. Her heart leaped, thinking it was Marcus explaining his delay. Instead, the message was from an unknown number. "Check your social media." With trembling fingers, Sarah opened her social media app. The first thing she saw made her stomach drop. There was a video posted by Marcus just an hour ago. In it, he was at the winter formal, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, laughing with his friends as he showed his phone to the camera. "Did you guys really think I was going to take Goodwill Girl to the formal?" Marcus's voice rang out clearly in the video. "I asked her as a joke to see if she'd actually think someone like me would date someone like her. Look at this response she sent me." The video showed screenshots of Sarah's excited text messages from earlier in the week, where she'd thanked him for asking her and mentioned how much she was looking forward to the dance. Her private, heartfelt words were now being mocked by dozens of students who had liked and shared the video. She even got a dress. Jessica's voice could be heard in the background, followed by cruel laughter. Someone should tell her that polyester doesn't count as formal wear. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the comments. Classmates she barely knew were writing horrible things about her appearance, her family's financial situation, and her naivety in believing that Marcus could genuinely be interested in her. The humiliation washed over her in waves, each comment feeling like a physical blow. "Sarah?" Her mother's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Nija, what's wrong?" Sarah couldn't speak. She handed her phone to her mother and watched as Maria's face hardened with anger and protective fury. Her mother's limited English didn't prevent her from understanding the cruelty of what had happened to her daughter. "These children," Maria said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "They will learn. Someday, they will learn who my daughter really is." Sarah ran to her room and threw herself on the bed, still wearing the dress they'd worked so hard to perfect. The fabric that had felt so special an hour ago now felt like a costume from a cruel joke. She buried her face in her pillow and sobbed, not just from the immediate humiliation, but from the realization that she'd never truly fit in at this school. The weekend passed in a haze of embarrassment and dread. Sarah knew that by Monday, everyone at school would have seen the video. She considered asking her mother if she could stay home sick, but Maria wouldn't hear of it. "You will hold your head high," her mother said firmly on Monday morning. "They may laugh today, but strength comes from how we face our challenges. Remember that, Sarah." Walking through the halls of Riverside High that Monday felt like running a gauntlet. Students pointed and whispered as she passed. Some were bold enough to make loud comments about Goodwill Girl and her fake date. Others simply stared with a mixture of pity and amusement that felt almost worse than the outright mockery. During lunch, Sarah found her usual table occupied by a group of freshmen who quickly scattered when she approached, as if her social pariah status might be contagious. She ended up eating in the library, where Mrs. Rodriguez, the librarian, pretended not to notice her red-rimmed eyes. "You know," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly as she reshelved books nearby, "some of the strongest people I know faced their worst moments in high school. It's not the end of your story, dear. It's just a difficult chapter." Sarah looked up at the older woman, who had always been kind to her. "It feels like everyone will remember this forever." "High school feels like forever when you're living it," Mrs. Rodriguez replied. "But it's really just a small part of your life. What matters is what you choose to do with the lessons you learn here." That afternoon, Sarah found herself in the guidance counselor's office, not by choice but because her English teacher had noticed her distress. Mr. Peterson, the counselor, was a well-meaning man who tried to address the situation by suggesting that kids will be kids and that the drama would blow over soon. "Have you considered joining some clubs or activities?" he asked, flipping through her file. "Your grades are excellent, by the way. You're in the top 10% of your class." Sarah almost laughed at the suggestion. After what had happened, the idea of putting herself in any position where she might face more humiliation seemed impossible. But, as she walked home that day, Mrs. Rodriguez's words echoed in her mind. This was just one chapter of her story. That evening, Sarah sat at her small desk in her bedroom, staring at her homework. The math problems and history essays that usually came easily to her felt overwhelming in the wake of her social destruction. But, as she began to work, she found comfort in the logic and structure of academic challenges. Here, in the realm of knowledge and learning, she could still excel. Here, her value wasn't determined by her clothes or her family's income. A week later, as the immediate sting of the formal incident began to fade into a dull ache, Sarah made a decision that would change the trajectory of her entire life. She was walking past the ROTC classroom after school when she noticed a poster on the door: leadership, honor, courage, commitment. Below it was information about the junior ROTC program, which she'd heard about but never considered. On impulse, she pushed open the door and found herself face to face with Master Sergeant Williams, a tall, imposing African-American woman in a crisp military uniform. The woman looked up from the papers she was grading and studied Sarah with keen, intelligent eyes. "Can I help you?" Master Sergeant Williams asked, her voice authoritative but not unkind. I saw the poster," Sarah said hesitantly. "I was wondering about the ROTC program." "What's your name, student?" "Sarah Martinez." Master Sergeant Williams gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Sarah Martinez. Tell me why you're interested in ROTC." Sarah found herself explaining not just her curiosity about the program, but everything: the move, the financial struggles, the humiliation at the formal, the feeling of being powerless in a social hierarchy that valued all the wrong things. Master Sergeant Williams listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. When Sarah finished, the Master Sergeant was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "The military isn't for everyone, Sarah. But it can be a place where your worth is measured by your character, your effort, and your ability to lead and serve others. Your background doesn't matter. Your clothes don't matter. What matters is what's in here," she pointed to her head, and here, she pointed to her heart. "Would I fit in?" Sarah asked, voicing her deepest fear. "In ROTC, we don't fit in. We stand out. We lead. We serve something bigger than ourselves." Master Sergeant Williams pulled out a packet of information. "Think about it over the weekend. If you're serious, come back Monday and we'll talk about enrollment." That weekend, Sarah researched everything she could about ROTC and military service. She learned about the discipline, the leadership training, the opportunities for education and advancement. Most importantly, she learned that the military valued merit over popularity, substance over style. Monday morning, Sarah walked into the ROTC classroom with her completed enrollment forms. Master Sergeant Williams looked them over and nodded approvingly. "Welcome to ROTC, Cadet Martinez. Your real education starts now." As Sarah put on the ROTC uniform for the first time later that week, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The girl looking back at her stood straighter, looked more confident, despite wearing the same face that had been mocked just weeks before. The uniform represented something Marcus and his friends could never understand: the opportunity to be valued for who she truly was, not for superficial markers of status. The other students in the ROTC program came from diverse backgrounds, but they shared common values of discipline, respect, and service. For the first time since moving to Riverside, Sarah felt like she might have found where she belonged. The program was challenging, both physically and mentally, but Sarah thrived under the structure and clear expectations. As the school year progressed, Sarah threw herself into ROTC training with the same dedication she'd always applied to her academics. She learned military history, leadership principles, and physical fitness. More importantly, she began to develop a sense of self-worth that didn't depend on peer approval or social status. The other students at Riverside High began to notice changes in Sarah, though few understood what they were seeing. She walked with purpose now, her posture erect and confident. She spoke up in class discussions with authority and insight. When Marcus or his friends made snide comments about her, she didn't shrink away or hide. She looked them directly in the eye and continued on her path, unbothered by their petty cruelty. "She thinks she's so special now," Jessica complained to her friends one day as they watched Sarah lead a group of ROTC cadets in a fundraising project for local veterans. But Sarah wasn't trying to be special. She was discovering something far more powerful: she was learning to be herself, fully and unapologetically. The girl who had once sat alone in the cafeteria was transforming into a young woman with purpose, direction, and an unshakable sense of her own worth. By the end of her junior year, Sarah had risen to a leadership position within the ROTC program. She was planning to apply for military academies and ROTC scholarships for college, pathways that would have been unimaginable to her just a year before. The humiliation at the winter formal, while still a painful memory, had become the catalyst for discovering her true calling.
Master Sergeant Williams watched Sarah's transformation with the satisfaction of a teacher who recognized exceptional potential.
During one of their regular mentoring sessions, she shared her own story of overcoming adversity to rise through the military ranks. "The people who mock you today," she told Sarah, "they're going to peak in high school. You're just getting started." Sarah nodded, understanding that her journey was far from over. She had learned that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on and growing stronger in the process. The scared, humiliated girl who had been pranked at the winter formal was evolving into someone who would not only survive but ultimately thrive far beyond the narrow confines of high school social politics. As her senior year approached, Sarah looked toward the future with anticipation rather than fear. She had found her path, and she was determined to follow it wherever it might lead. 4 years had passed since Sarah Martinez graduated from Riverside High, and the corridors of the United States Military Academy at West Point echoed with the sharp sound of her polished boots against the stone floors. The transformation from the girl who once sat alone in the cafeteria to Cadet First Class Martinez, battalion commander, had been nothing short of remarkable. The acceptance letter to West Point had arrived on a cloudy Tuesday morning during her senior year. Sarah remembered holding the thick envelope with trembling hands while her mother cried tears of joy in the kitchen of their small apartment. The full scholarship meant not only that Sarah could pursue her education without burdening her family financially, but also that she was embarking on a path that would fundamentally change the trajectory of her life. The early days at West Point had been brutal. The physical demands, academic rigor, and military discipline created a pressure cooker environment where many cadets struggled to survive. But Sarah thrived. The years of being underestimated had taught her to prove herself through actions rather than words, and the discipline she'd learned in high school ROTCs served her well in the more demanding academy environment. Her roommate during her first year was Catherine Brooks, a blonde girl from Connecticut whose father was a retired Navy admiral. Catherine initially seemed to embody everything Sarah had learned to expect from privileged classmates: confident, well-connected, and casually dismissive of those she perceived as beneath her social station. But West Point had a way of stripping away superficial differences and revealing character. During their first major field exercise, Catherine had panicked when their unit became separated in dense woods during a night navigation exercise. Sarah had calmly taken charge, used her map-reading skills to reorient their team, and led them safely back to the checkpoint. That night, sitting in their tent while rain drummed against the canvas, Catherine had looked at Sarah with new respect. "I misjudged you," Catherine admitted quietly. "I thought because you were quiet and different, that you wouldn't be able to handle the pressure here." Sarah had smiled in the darkness. "A lot of people have made that mistake." From that point forward, Catherine became not just a roommate but a genuine friend. She was the first person Sarah had trusted enough to tell about the humiliation at her high school formal, and Catherine's angry reaction had been both validating and therapeutic. Those people were idiots, Catherine had declared. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "I hope they see you now and realize how badly they screwed up." Sarah's academic performance at West Point was exceptional. She majored in international relations with a minor in military history, maintaining a GPA that put her in the top 5% of her class. But it wasn't just her grades that set her apart. She demonstrated natural leadership abilities that caught the attention of her instructors and tactical officers. During her sophomore year, Sarah was selected to lead a community outreach program in nearby Highland Falls, where West Point cadets mentored at-risk youth from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Many of the kids reminded Sarah of herself at that age: bright, capable, but lacking the resources and opportunities that others took for granted. One student in particular, a 12-year-old named Marcus, shared more than just a name with the boy who had humiliated Sarah in high school. This Marcus was withdrawn, angry, and convinced that his circumstances would define his entire future. Sarah spent extra time with him, sharing her own story of transformation and gradually helping him see that his current situation was not his permanent destination. "Miss Sarah," Marcus asked during one of their sessions, "how did you know you could do all this military stuff? Weren't you scared?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But I learned that being scared and being brave aren't opposites.
Sometimes being brave means doing what you need to do even when you're scared. By her junior year at West Point, Sarah had been promoted to company commander, responsible for leading over 100 of her fellow cadets. The position required not only military competence but also the ability to inspire, discipline, and develop others. Sarah approached the role with the same quiet intensity she brought to everything else, earning the respect of both her subordinates and superiors. Her tactical officer, Major Patricia Reynolds, was a career infantry officer who had broken numerous barriers during her own rise through the ranks. Major Reynolds saw in Sarah a kindred spirit, someone who understood that excellence was the only acceptable response to those who doubted your capabilities. Martinez, Major Reynolds said during one of their regular counseling sessions, "You have the potential to go very far in the Army. But potential means nothing if you don't have the courage to pursue positions where you can make a real difference." Sarah nodded, understanding the underlying message. The military was still an institution where women, particularly women of color from modest backgrounds, had to work twice as hard to achieve the same recognition as their male counterparts. But Sarah had been working twice as hard her entire life. During her final year at West Point, Sarah was selected as the Cadet Battalion Commander, one of the highest-ranking positions available to students. The appointment came with significant responsibility and pressure, as she would be evaluated not only on her own performance but on the performance of the nearly 400 cadets under her command. The role also meant increased visibility, including representing West Point at various official functions and ceremonies. At one such event, a dinner honoring distinguished alumni, Sarah found herself seated next to General Patricia Horowo, the former Army Surgeon General. The general was an imposing woman whose presence commanded respect, but she spoke to Sarah with warmth and genuine interest. "Tell me about your plans after graduation, Cadet Martinez," General Horowo asked. Sarah outlined her intention to branch into military intelligence, her interest in international affairs, and her long-term goal of contributing to national security policy. The general listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her genuine engagement with Sarah's aspirations. "The Army needs officers like you," General Horowo said finally. "Officers who understand service from the ground up, who don't take their opportunities for granted. Stay focused, work hard, and don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong in any room you enter." Those words would resonate with Sarah for years to come, particularly during the challenging moments that lay ahead in her military career. Graduation from West Point was an emotional milestone that Sarah celebrated with her mother, who had taken time off from the diner to attend the ceremony. Maria Martinez looked impossibly proud as she watched her daughter receive her commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. The transformation from the girl who had been mocked for her thrift store dress to the poised young officer crossing the stage seemed almost miraculous. "Your father would be so proud," Maria whispered through tears as she pinned Sarah's new lieutenant bars on her uniform. Sarah's father had passed away from a heart attack during her sophomore year at West Point, but she knew her mother was right. He would have been incredibly proud to see how far his daughter had come. Sarah's first assignment was to Fort Huachuca in Arizona, where she would attend the Military Intelligence Officer Basic Course. The transition from cadet to active duty officer brought new challenges and responsibilities, but Sarah approached them with the same determination that had carried her through the academy. The intelligence course was intellectually demanding, covering everything from strategic analysis to tactical surveillance operations. Sarah excelled in the academic portions and demonstrated particular aptitude for understanding complex geopolitical situations. Her instructors noted her ability to synthesize information from multiple sources and develop actionable intelligence assessments. During one exercise, Sarah was tasked with developing an intelligence brief for a simulated deployment to an unstable region. Her analysis was so thorough and insightful that the instructors used it as an example for future classes. The recognition felt good, but Sarah was more interested in the substance of the work than the acclaim. After completing the course, Sarah was assigned to her first operational unit at Fort Stewart in Georgia. The 3rd Infantry Division was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, and Sarah would be serving as an intelligence officer responsible for analyzing threats and developing countermeasures to protect her unit. The deployment to Afghanistan marked Sarah's first experience in actual combat operations.
The responsibility of providing intelligence that could mean the difference between life and death for her fellow soldiers was both daunting and motivating. She approached the work with meticulous attention to detail, knowing that any oversight could have tragic consequences. During her deployment, Sarah's unit faced several complex situations that tested her analytical skills and leadership abilities. One incident in particular stood out as a defining moment in her career. Her analysis of intercepted communications led to the discovery of a planned attack on a village where her unit was conducting humanitarian operations. Her quick thinking and accurate assessment allowed the unit to neutralize the threat and save civilian lives. The successful mission earned Sarah a Bronze Star Medal, but, more importantly, it validated her belief that her work in military intelligence could make a meaningful difference in protecting lives and advancing national interests. The scared girl from Riverside High had become a decorated officer whose expertise was valued by senior leaders. When she returned from Afghanistan, Sarah was promoted to first lieutenant and assigned to the Pentagon, where she would work in strategic intelligence analysis. The position offered exposure to high-level decision-making and the opportunity to contribute to policy development at the national level. Working in the Pentagon was intimidating at first, as Sarah found herself in meetings with colonels and generals who had decades of experience. But she had learned to trust her preparation and expertise, speaking up when she had valuable insights to offer and asking thoughtful questions when she needed clarification. Her supervisor, Colonel James Mitchell, was initially skeptical of the young lieutenant who seemed too quiet and reserved for the fast-paced Pentagon environment. But Sarah's work spoke for itself. Her intelligence assessments were thorough, accurate, and written with a clarity that made complex situations understandable to senior leaders who needed to make critical decisions. Martinez, Colonel Mitchell said during her first performance review, "When you first arrived here, I wasn't sure you had the personality for this job. But I've learned that substance matters more than style, and you've got substance in abundance." The recognition meant a great deal to Sarah, but she remained focused on the work rather than the praise. She was developing expertise in Middle Eastern affairs and counter-terrorism operations, areas that would define much of her career trajectory. During her time at the Pentagon, Sarah also pursued her master's degree in international security studies through a part-time program at Georgetown University. The academic work complemented her professional responsibilities and deepened her understanding of the global security environment. Her thesis on emerging threats in cyberspace warfare earned recognition from her professors and was later cited in professional military journals. As she approached the end of her Pentagon assignment, Sarah reflected on how far she had come since her high school days. The girl who had once been humiliated by cruel classmates had become an expert in her field, trusted by senior leaders and respected by her peers. But she knew that her journey was far from over. She was building a career that would allow her to serve her country at the highest levels, and every challenge she overcame made her stronger and more capable. The promotion to captain came with her next assignment to Fort Bragg, where she would serve as the intelligence officer for a special forces unit. The position would require her to work with some of the Army's most elite soldiers on highly classified operations. It was another step up in responsibility and complexity, exactly the kind of challenge Sarah had been preparing for throughout her career. As she packed her belongings for the move to North Carolina, Sarah thought about the lessons she had learned during her transformation from high school outcast to respected military officer. She had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding adversity but from facing it head-on and growing stronger in the process. The mockery and humiliation that had once seemed so devastating had actually been the catalyst for discovering her true potential. She thought about Master Sergeant Williams, her first ROTC instructor, who had recognized her potential when others saw only a quiet, troubled girl. She thought about Major Reynolds and General Horoho, who had shown her what was possible for women in the military. And she thought about her mother, who had never stopped believing in her daughter's ability to achieve extraordinary things. The girl who had once been called Goodwill Girl was now Captain Sarah Martinez, a decorated intelligence officer with a bright future ahead of her. But the most important transformation had happened not in her rank or position, but in her understanding of her own worth and capabilities. She no longer needed external validation to know her value, and she had learned that the opinions of small-minded people were irrelevant to her success. As she drove away from the Pentagon for the last time, Sarah felt a sense of anticipation about the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. She was ready for whatever came next, confident in her abilities and committed to serving something greater than herself.
The best was yet to come.
The years that followed Sarah's assignment to Fort Bragg marked a period of extraordinary professional growth and personal development. Captain Martinez had quickly established herself as an indispensable asset to the Special Forces community, where her intelligence assessments and strategic insights had contributed to numerous successful operations across multiple theaters of conflict. Her commanding officer, Colonel David Chen, was a veteran Green Beret who had initially been skeptical about working with a young intelligence officer who lacked direct special operations experience. However, Sarah's meticulous preparation, innovative analytical approaches, and calm demeanor under pressure had quickly won his respect and trust. Martinez, Colonel Chen had told her during one particularly intense operational planning session, "You have an intuitive understanding of how intelligence fits into the bigger picture.
That's rare, even among seasoned officers."
The compliment meant more to Sarah than Colonel Chen could have known. Throughout her career, she had worked to prove that her value extended beyond simply gathering and analyzing information. She understood that intelligence was most powerful when it directly supported decision-making and operational success. During her 3 years at Fort Bragg, Sarah had been promoted to major and had taken on increasingly complex responsibilities. Her expertise in Middle Eastern affairs and counterterrorism had made her a sought-after briefer for senior leaders, and she had developed a reputation for delivering clear, actionable intelligence assessments even in rapidly evolving situations. One of her most significant contributions came during a joint operation with coalition forces in Syria. Sarah's analysis of communication intercepts and behavioral patterns had identified a network of high-value targets that had been eluding capture for months. Her recommendation for a coordinated series of raids had resulted in the successful dismantling of a major terrorist cell and the capture of several key operatives. The operation's success had earned Sarah a Meritorious Service Medal and brought her to the attention of senior leaders at United States Central Command. More importantly to Sarah, it had prevented potential attacks that could have cost civilian lives. The scared girl who had once hidden in the library during lunch period had become someone whose work directly contributed to global security. Sarah's next assignment took her to Tampa, Florida, where she joined the staff of United States Central Command as a senior intelligence analyst focused on regional threats and emerging security challenges. The position represented a significant step up in responsibility and visibility, as she would be briefing general officers and contributing to strategic planning for one of the most important geographic combatant commands.
The transition to CENTCOM brought new challenges and opportunities.
Sarah found herself working with intelligence professionals from across the interagency community, including representatives from the CIA, NSA, and State Department. The collaborative environment required not only technical expertise but also diplomatic skills and the ability to build consensus among strong personalities with different perspectives. Her immediate supervisor at CENTCOM was Brigadier General Lisa Rodriguez, the Deputy Intelligence Director and one of the highest-ranking Hispanic women in the military. General Rodriguez had broken numerous barriers during her own career and served as both a mentor and role model for Sarah. Major Martinez, General Rodriguez said during their first formal counseling session, "You have exceptional analytical skills, but that's not what will determine how far you go in your career. Your ability to lead, inspire, and develop others will be the measure of your ultimate success." The feedback resonated deeply with Sarah, who had been so focused on technical excellence that she hadn't fully considered the broader leadership responsibilities that came with senior rank. General Rodriguez became a crucial mentor, helping Sarah understand how to translate her intelligence expertise into effective leadership and strategic thinking. Under General Rodriguez's guidance, Sarah began taking on additional responsibilities beyond her primary analytical duties. She led a team that developed new approaches to threat assessment and risk analysis, incorporating lessons learned from recent conflicts and emerging technological capabilities. Her innovative methodologies were later adopted across the intelligence community and became standard practice for evaluating complex security environments. Sarah also began participating in high-level strategic planning sessions, where her insights on regional dynamics and threat trends informed major policy decisions. She learned to communicate effectively with senior leaders who needed to make critical choices with incomplete information and limited time.
The ability to distill complex intelligence into actionable recommendations became one of her most valued skills.
During her time at CENTCOM, Sarah was selected to attend the Air War College, a prestigious military education program designed to prepare officers for strategic leadership positions. The year-long program provided an opportunity to step back from operational responsibilities and focus on broadening her understanding of national security policy, joint operations, and strategic planning. The War College experience was transformative for Sarah in unexpected ways. Surrounded by fellow officers from all branches of the military, as well as civilians from various government agencies and international partners, she gained new perspectives on leadership, strategy, and the complex challenges facing national security professionals. One of her classmates was Lieutenant Colonel Michael Thompson, a Navy pilot who shared Sarah's commitment to excellence and service. Their friendship, which eventually developed into a romantic relationship, provided Sarah with emotional support and companionship that she hadn't realized she was missing.
Michael understood the demands of military life and shared her dedication to making a meaningful contribution to their country's security. Their relationship progressed carefully and professionally, as both understood the importance of maintaining their focus on their careers while building a foundation for a potential future together. Michael's respect for Sarah's intelligence and ambition, combined with his own achievements as a naval aviator, created a partnership of equals that strengthened both of them. Sarah's research project at the War College focused on the evolution of intelligence analysis in an era of rapidly changing technology and emerging threats. Her thesis on artificial intelligence applications in strategic analysis earned recognition from the faculty and was later published in the Joint Forces Quarterly, a prestigious military journal. Upon graduation from the War College, Sarah was promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to the Joint Staff at the Pentagon, where she would serve as a strategic planner in the Intelligence Directorate. The position represented another significant advancement in her career and placed her at the center of national-level intelligence planning and policy development. Working on the Joint Staff exposed Sarah to the highest levels of defense decision-making and gave her insights into how intelligence supported national strategy. She participated in briefings for the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, experiences that reinforced her understanding of the critical role intelligence played in protecting national interests. Her reputation for analytical rigor and clear communication made her a valued contributor to various strategic initiatives. Sarah led efforts to improve intelligence sharing between different agencies and departments, addressing long-standing challenges that had hindered effective collaboration. Her recommendations resulted in procedural changes that improved the speed and accuracy of intelligence dissemination across the national security community. During her tenure on the Joint Staff, Sarah also became involved in professional development activities aimed at encouraging young officers, particularly women and minorities, to pursue leadership positions in the intelligence field. She regularly spoke at military academies and professional conferences, sharing her experiences and encouraging others to consider careers in intelligence and national security. These speaking engagements gave Sarah opportunities to reflect on her journey from the girl who had been humiliated in high school to a lieutenant colonel serving at the highest levels of government. She often thought about how the cruel treatment she had received had actually motivated her to prove her worth through achievement and service, ultimately leading to opportunities she could never have imagined. One evening, while preparing for a presentation at West Point, Sarah received a Facebook message that made her pause. It was from Catherine Brooks, her former roommate at the academy, who had left the military after her initial service commitment to pursue a career in civilian intelligence. "Sarah," the message read, "I saw your name in the Army Times article about rising stars in military intelligence. I'm so proud of how far you've come. Do you ever think about that scared girl from Texas we met during our first year? Look at what she became." Sarah smiled as she read the message. Catherine was referring to Maria Santos, a fellow cadet who had struggled with confidence issues similar to what Sarah had experienced in high school. Sarah had taken Maria under her wing, providing mentorship and support that helped her develop into a capable officer. Maria was now a major serving in Germany, and her success was one of many examples of how Sarah had learned to pay forward the guidance she had received from her own mentors.
The promotion to colonel came with Sarah's assignment as the intelligence director for United States Southern Command, responsible for intelligence operations and analysis covering Latin America and the Caribbean. The position represented a return to regional focus while providing her first opportunity to serve as a senior intelligence director for a major command. Taking over as a director required Sarah to transition from being a skilled analyst and planner to becoming a senior leader responsible for guiding the work of hundreds of intelligence professionals. She drew on the leadership lessons she had learned throughout her career, particularly the importance of setting clear expectations, providing meaningful feedback, and developing subordinates to reach their full potential. Her leadership style emphasized collaboration and professional development, creating an environment where talented analysts could thrive while maintaining the high standards necessary for effective intelligence operations. Sarah instituted regular professional development sessions where team members could share insights and learn from each other's expertise. Under her leadership, the Intelligence Directorate at Southcom became known for innovative analytical approaches and accurate assessments that significantly improved operational effectiveness. Sarah's team developed new methodologies for analyzing transnational threats and trafficking networks, contributing to successful operations that disrupted criminal organizations and protected regional stability. The success of her team earned recognition from senior leaders throughout the intelligence community, but Sarah remained focused on the mission rather than personal accolades. She had learned that true leadership meant enabling others to succeed while maintaining focus on the larger organizational objectives. During her time at Southcom, Sarah also completed her doctoral degree in international relations through a distance learning program, writing her dissertation on the evolution of intelligence analysis in counterterrorism operations. The academic work complemented her practical experience and deepened her understanding of the theoretical foundations underlying intelligence practice. Her research was later published as a book that became required reading in graduate programs focusing on national security studies. The publication established Sarah as a recognized expert in her field and brought her to the attention of senior policymakers beyond the military intelligence community. As she approached the end of her assignment at Southcom, Sarah reflected on how much her perspective on success had evolved since her early career. Initially, she had been motivated primarily by a desire to prove herself worthy of respect and recognition. Over time, she had discovered that true fulfillment came from service to something larger than herself and from helping others achieve their potential. The girl who had once been mocked for her second-hand clothes had become a colonel whose expertise was sought by senior leaders across the government. But, more importantly, she had become someone who used her position and influence to make a positive difference in the lives of others and in the security of her country. The promotion to brigadier general arrived with orders to serve as the deputy director of intelligence at United States European Command, a position that would prepare her for even greater responsibilities ahead. As she prepared for the move to Germany, Sarah thought about how far she had traveled from that lonely cafeteria table at Riverside High School. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge had made her stronger and more capable. She was ready for whatever responsibilities lay ahead, confident in her abilities and committed to serving with the same dedication and integrity that had brought her this far. The best chapters of her story were still to be written. 25 years had passed since Sarah Martinez walked across the stage at Riverside High School, her head held high despite the whispers and pointing that followed her everywhere. Now, as she stepped out of the black government sedan at Stuttgart Airport, the 4 stars on her uniform caught the German sunlight, reflecting the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment as the youngest 4-star general in United States Army history. General Sarah Martinez, commander of United States European Command, had just completed a series of high-level meetings with NATO allies regarding emerging security challenges in Eastern Europe. Her expertise in intelligence and strategic planning had made her one of the most respected military leaders in the international community, but today her thoughts were not focused on geopolitical concerns or military strategy. Tucked in her briefcase was an invitation that had arrived 3 weeks earlier, forwarded through military postal channels from her childhood address in Texas. The envelope was cream-colored with elegant script, and inside was an invitation to the 25-year reunion of Riverside High School's class of 2000. Sarah's first instinct had been to discard the invitation immediately. The memories of her high school years were not one she particularly wanted to revisit, and her schedule as a combatant commander left little time for nostalgic gatherings. But something had made her pause before throwing it away, perhaps curiosity about how her former classmates had fared in the quarter century since graduation. Her aide, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Walsh, had noticed the invitation on Sarah's desk during their daily briefing session. "Planning to attend your high school reunion, General?" she had asked with a slight smile. Sarah had laughed, shaking her head. "I can't imagine anything I'd want to do less. High school wasn't exactly the best time of my life." But the invitation had remained on her desk, and, over the following days, Sarah found herself thinking about it more than she cared to admit. Finally, she had asked her scheduler to check her calendar for the reunion weekend. To her surprise, she had a brief window between her European commitments and a planned visit to Washington for Joint Chiefs meetings. The decision to attend hadn't been easy, and, even now, as she settled into her seat for the flight back to the United States, Sarah wasn't entirely sure why she had chosen to go. Perhaps it was curiosity about how the people who had once defined her worth by such shallow standards had turned out. Perhaps it was a desire to demonstrate that their cruelty had not broken her but had instead forged her into something stronger. Or perhaps it was simply time to close a chapter that had been left open for too long. The flight gave Sarah time to reflect on the extraordinary trajectory her life had taken since those difficult high school days. After her success at European Command, she had been promoted to her 4th star and given responsibility for overseeing some of the most critical military operations in the world. Her strategic vision and leadership had earned respect from presidents, prime ministers, and military leaders across the globe. Her personal life had also flourished during her rise through the ranks. She and Michael Thompson, now Admiral Thompson, had married 12 years earlier in a ceremony attended by military leaders and family members alike. Their partnership had become one of the most respected dual military marriages in the services, with both supporting each other's careers while maintaining their individual excellence. They had adopted 2 children, siblings who had been orphaned during a humanitarian crisis that Sarah had helped address through her military intelligence work. Maria Elena and David Martinez Thompson were now teenagers themselves, bright and confident young people who understood the importance of service and had been raised to value character over superficial achievements. Sarah's mother, now in her 70s, lived comfortably in a house that Sarah had purchased for her in San Antonio. Maria Martinez had never stopped being proud of her daughter, but she also maintained the same humble perspective that had sustained their family through difficult times. "Mija," she would often remind Sarah during their weekly phone calls, "rank and titles are just words. What matters is how you treat people and how you serve God and country." As the plane descended toward Dallas, Sarah thought about how her high school classmates might react to seeing her again. The local newspaper had covered her promotion to 4-star general, so some might know about her military career. But she suspected that many would still see her through the lens of their 17-year-old perceptions, unable to reconcile the quiet girl from the cafeteria with the accomplished general she had become. The reunion was being held at the Riverside Country Club, an irony that was not lost on Sarah. The same establishment that had represented the pinnacle of social status for her wealthy classmates was now hosting an event where she would likely be the most accomplished person in attendance. She had purchased a simple but elegant black dress for the occasion, choosing something that reflected her current confidence while remaining appropriate for the setting. Sarah arrived at the country club exactly on time, a habit ingrained by decades of military precision. The parking lot was filled with luxury cars and SUVs, suggesting that many of her former classmates had achieved financial success in their chosen careers. As she walked toward the entrance, she noticed several people doing double takes, clearly recognizing her but seeming uncertain about approaching. Inside the country club, the reunion was in full swing. Banners displaying their graduation year hung from the walls, and tables were arranged around the room with centerpieces featuring photos from their senior year. Sarah paused at the registration table, where she was greeted by Amy Chen, who had been student council president and was now apparently organizing their reunion. "Sarah Martinez!" Amy exclaimed, her voice carrying genuine surprise and delight. "I can't believe you made it. When we sent the invitation, we weren't even sure it would reach you. I mean, we heard you were in the military, but we had no idea you were a general." Sarah smiled warmly. "It's good to see you, Amy. You did a wonderful job organizing this. As Sarah moved into the main room, she became aware of the subtle shift in atmosphere that her presence created. Conversations paused as people noticed her, and she could see groups of former classmates whispering and gesturing in her direction. Some approached to greet her warmly, expressing genuine admiration for her accomplishments. Others maintained their distance, perhaps unsure how to interact with someone whose achievements so far exceeded their own. Near the bar, Sarah spotted a familiar face that made her pause. Marcus Thompson, the boy who had humiliated her at the winter formal, was standing with several other members of their former popular crowd. He had gained weight over the years and his hairline had receded significantly, giving him a softer, less confident appearance than the cocky teenager she remembered. Marcus noticed her looking in his direction and, after what appeared to be encouragement from his companions, approached her with a nervous smile. "Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." Marcus Thompson. "I remember you quite well, Marcus," Sarah replied, accepting his handshake with the same firm grip she used in military settings. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the weight of their shared history. "Listen, Sarah, I've been thinking about what happened in high school, and I wanted to say. I was just a stupid kid, and what I did was cruel and wrong. I'm sorry." Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine remorse along with obvious nervousness. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, sometimes fantasizing about the devastating comeback she would deliver if given the chance. But, standing here now, looking at this middle-aged man who seemed diminished by time and, perhaps regret, she felt no anger or need for revenge. "Thank you for saying that, Marcus," she replied simply. "We were all young and making mistakes. I hope life has treated you well." The grace of her response seemed to surprise him, and perhaps some of the people nearby who were clearly listening to their conversation. Marcus nodded gratefully before retreating to his group, leaving Sarah to continue her circuit of the room. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself engaged in numerous conversations about her career and experiences. Many of her former classmates expressed amazement at her achievements, with several admitting that they would never have predicted such success for the quiet girl they barely remembered from high school. Jessica Morrison, the former head cheerleader who had been particularly cruel during their school years, approached Sarah during the dinner portion of the evening. Jessica had clearly maintained her physical appearance well, but there was something brittle about her smile and forced enthusiasm. "Sarah, oh my goodness!" Jessica gushed. "I just have to tell you how incredible it is to see how successful you've become. A 4-star general. Who would have thought?" The comment, clearly intended to be complimentary, carried an undertone of condescension that reminded Sarah exactly why she had disliked Jessica so intensely during high school. But, rather than feeling hurt or angry, Sarah found herself almost amused by the transparent attempt to claim some reflected glory from her success. "Thank you, Jessica," Sarah replied pleasantly. "I understand you've had success in real estate." "That's wonderful." Jessica's smile faltered slightly at the polite but dismissive response. She had clearly expected a more effusive reaction, perhaps hoping that Sarah would be grateful for her attention and approval. Instead, she found herself facing someone whose confidence and achievements made her own accomplishments seem insignificant by comparison. Later in the evening, the reunion organizers arranged for brief remarks from various classmates who had achieved notable success. Sarah had been asked to speak, but she had politely declined, preferring to observe rather than become the focus of attention. However, as the evening was winding down, Amy Chen convinced her to say a few words. Standing at the microphone, Sarah looked out at the faces of her former classmates, seeing them now not as the intimidating arbiters of social status they had once seemed, but as middle-aged adults with their own struggles, successes, and disappointments. "Thank you for inviting me to share this evening with all of you," she began, her voice carrying the authority and composure that had been honed through decades of briefing senior leaders and addressing troops. "High school is a formative time for all of us, and while it wasn't always easy, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned during those years." She paused, making eye contact with various individuals around the room, including Marcus and Jessica. "I learned that the opinions of others don't define our worth, that adversity can be a catalyst for growth, and that our circumstances at 17 don't determine our potential for the rest of our lives."
I hope all of you have found happiness and fulfillment in whatever paths you've chosen." The applause that followed was genuine and sustained, and Sarah could see that her words had resonated with many people who had faced their own challenges and transformations over the past 25 years. As she prepared to leave the reunion, Sarah was approached by several classmates who wanted to take photos with her, something that amused her given how invisible she had been during their actual school years. She accommodated the requests graciously, understanding that her presence represented something meaningful to people who had perhaps struggled with their own sense of achievement and purpose. Outside the country club, waiting for her driver, Sarah encountered one final surprise. Mrs. Rodriguez, her former high school librarian, was leaving the reunion at the same time. The elderly woman, now retired, recognized Sarah immediately and approached with a warm smile. "General Martinez," she said, using Sarah's current title with obvious pride. "I always knew you would do something extraordinary with your life." Sarah felt a rush of emotion at seeing the woman who had shown her kindness during some of her darkest high school days. "Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for everything you did for me back then. Your encouragement meant more than you could know." The librarian smiled, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "You just needed someone to see your potential and remind you that high school is just the beginning of your story. Look how beautifully that story has unfolded." As Sarah's car arrived and she prepared to leave Riverside behind once again, she reflected on how the evening had exceeded her expectations. Rather than feeling vindicated or triumphant, she felt a sense of closure and peace. The people who had once seemed so powerful and important in defining her worth were revealed to be ordinary individuals dealing with their own challenges and limitations. The drive to the airport gave Sarah time to process the evening's events. She realized that attending the reunion had served a purpose she hadn't fully anticipated. It had allowed her to see with adult perspective the adolescent dynamics that had once seemed so significant. More importantly, it had reinforced her understanding that her worth had never been determined by the opinions of her high school classmates, regardless of their social status or popularity. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Michael, who was currently deployed overseas. "How was the reunion? Did you show them who you really are?" Sarah smiled as she typed her response. "I showed them who I've always been. They just couldn't see it before." The reunion had reminded Sarah that her greatest victory wasn't proving wrong the people who had underestimated her, but discovering and developing the potential that had always existed within her. The scared, humiliated girl from the winter formal had possessed the same intelligence, determination, and character that had ultimately led to 4 stars and command of one of the world's most important military organizations. The difference wasn't in who she was, but in her understanding of her own worth and capabilities. As the plane lifted off from Dallas, carrying her back to her duties in Europe, Sarah thought about the young people currently sitting in high school cafeterias around the world, feeling invisible, inadequate, or humiliated by their peers. She hoped they would somehow learn what it had taken her years to discover, that their current circumstances were not their destiny, that their worth was not determined by others' opinions, and that the courage to pursue excellence and service could transform not only their own lives but the lives of others they would eventually have the privilege to serve. The girl who had been mocked for shopping at Goodwill had become a woman whose uniform represented the highest levels of leadership and service. But the most important transformation had been internal, the development of unshakable confidence in her own value and purpose that no amount of ridicule or praise could alter. Sarah Martinez had indeed stunned everyone at the reunion, not through boasting or seeking revenge, but by demonstrating the grace, accomplishment, and character that comes from a life devoted to something greater than oneself. She had become everything those cruel teenagers could never have imagined, and, in doing so, had proven that the opinions of small minds are powerless against the determination of a great heart.